So we've got confirmation of this. They have got to the 28-day threshold. This is 2 cycles of this maximum length of COVID. Why wait longer? What's the specific medical advice to wait until December 1?
Well, the December 1 is on our roadmap. We have put it very clearly out there for the public to see now for many months, and we're sticking to that. And that now gives people the opportunity to book their accommodation, to book their flights, for airlines to put on additional flights, which they're already doing. And I'm hearing from accommodation operators across Queensland that they are seeing a 250% increase in the number of inquiries for bookings, which is fantastic news. And to hear that Victoria's got those 28 days now of zero and no community transmission, that is absolutely wonderful news. And I know there's going to be a lot of Victorians happy, a lot of Queenslanders happy. They can go and visit each other, and the same for New South Wales. So it's wonderful to see the whole East Coast opening up in time for Christmas. Wonderful news.
Yeah, and I know for a lot of families too. Can you clarify what the situation will be? So whether you're flying in, perhaps driving over that New South Wales border, will there still be checks? Will there be, we've seen police and Defence Force and so on at the borders. Will they still be in place? Will there be anything you need to fill out before you land, for example, as well?
Well, it depends on what happens with South Australia, so I don't want to preempt that because we have to wait till the end of the month to assess that, and the Chief Health Officer will provide advice. But in terms of if you're coming from everywhere else except South Australia, you will not have to fill in any declaration pass, but there will be, depending on whether Adelaide is still a hotspot or not, they may need to have a border declaration pass. So, look, we're working through those issues at the moment, but we want to make it as, free-flowing as possible and easy for people. And for people who can't get flights, they can hop in their cars and do the old traditional road trip. I used to do those when I was a kid with my family. I remember them to this day. I think we counted all the number of windmills on the way from Brisbane down to Sydney. There's a whole lot of different ways that people can travel these days. So I think it's great news for families. It was always the aspiration of the National Cabinet that we were able to, reunite as a country for Christmas and families to spend time together, and it's just wonderful to see that happen.
And in terms of people booking things, what assurance can you give that the borders will stay open? Or put another way, what would it take for you to close the border again to Victoria, to Sydney, to Melbourne, whatever the situation might be?
Sure. Well, I think, we would look very clearly about what that each state would be doing. And as we saw during the course of this pandemic, borders were shut, but also hotspots were declared as well. So we have said in our roadmap that there will be a hotspots regime, but I can't predict the future. I can't predict if there's going to be another hotel quarantine breach. That's where the danger is at the moment in terms of impact of COVID on Australians. And we would look at what each state or territory does, and then, of course, we would listen to our health advice. But fingers crossed, Australia will be open up to Australians, and that's the way we want to see it as agreed to by National Cabinet. But anything can happen in this world. Look what's happening over in the Northern Hemisphere at the moment, in the UK, in Spain, you name it, those countries, Ireland. They're going into different forms of lockdown, Italy again as well, and they are in for a very, very bleak winter, and there is more chance with returning Australians coming home that we're detecting more in hotel quarantine, so we have to be absolutely vigilant that our hotel quarantine is as tight can be.
So we have seen, though, despite all of these different measures taken, cases are getting out. This is a very hard virus to contain. You mentioned National Cabinet, and the approach is supposed to have been suppression, albeit eradication is a good result. On, again, whether you'll shut borders again in the future, are there going to be cases, if you see 2 or 3 cases, that's it, in Melbourne or Sydney, that you could still keep the borders open? Is there an assurance that it's not an eradication approach from Queensland, that there is still an appetite to assess risk rather than to say, you've got 1 case, that's it, we're shutting again?
Well, the aspiration is no community transmission. That's the National Cabinet approach. The Deputy Chief Health Officer said they want to see no community transmission in Australia. That's exactly what we have stood by. and we will continue to see returning Australians coming back from those Northern Hemisphere countries, and including the US, that will actually come into our hotel quarantine and will be detected with this virus, because there is more virus out there in the Northern Hemisphere. Now, that could be catastrophic to Australia if that hotel quarantine isn't rock solid.
So just on that then, if there's any community transmission, and we should be specific here because I know there's different terminology, are we talking about a locally acquired case or a mystery case? If there's any one of them in another state, would you put the borders up or would you declare hotspots in that situation?
No, we said in our roadmap we would declare hotspots. It's in our roadmap. But let's take for example, if there was another issue in like where they had in Victoria, and say it happened in Sydney, and all of Sydney went into lockdown, well then we would declare Sydney a hotspot. I mean, it's just common sense. And likewise, if something happened in Queensland, I mean, other states will take issues depending on what that state does. I mean, this is a rapidly contagious virus, and the last thing I want to see is economies shut down. And that is what this virus does. Have a look at the UK. Have a look at the death rates in Germany, in France, in Ireland. I was speaking to some friends who have got relatives in Ireland over the weekend. Their society is not functioning like Australia is functioning at the moment. So we have to realise we are still in this COVID world, and the best way that we can prevent the spread of it is to continue our social distancing, continuing our good hand hygiene, and having COVID-safe plans in place. And as our health minister said the other day, the best form of defence as well is if you go into a restaurant or a cafe or a pub, is that you must leave your details so you can contact trace. I mean, that is going to be very important as we move into this, next phase of this Australia opening up, that we're able to contact trace those people quickly. We have very robust systems in place. I mean, they have been assessed nationally as well, but anything can happen at any time, and we have to be ready and we have to be prepared. Our testing rates have to remain strong in Australia.
And I understand
so that means if people are sick, they need to stay home.
Sorry to jump in there, Premier. I just wanted to establish the threshold, though, for those hotspots. So will it be a single locally acquired case in Melbourne or Sydney would trigger a hotspot from the Queensland point of view, because that wouldn't necessarily be
I take the advice from the Chief Health Officer, and the Chief Health Officers talk to all the other Chief Health Officers across Australia. I mean, they talk regularly about it. So,
but they haven't always agreed, for example, between New South Wales and Queensland. They haven't always agreed. I'm just trying to find out what the threshold is.
Well, I think you'll find that the Chief Health Officers have agreed. I think you'll find that.
So the New South Wales Chief Health Officer and the Queensland Chief Health Officer have agreed on when the border should be up for New South Wales and Queensland?
They have a very good relationship, so they take on board all of that information and they talk regularly.
But have they agreed on the position of the border?
Thank you.
Sorry, Premier, have they agreed on the position of the border?
States can make... Look, honestly, we're going around in circles here. States have the prerogative. The High Court upheld the situation where states can make the decisions to look after the health of their citizens, and strong border measures protect the health of their citizens. It was upheld by the High Court.
Okay, can I just ask you finally about your relationship with Gladys Berejiklian? She's accused you of making things up as you go along. How is the relationship, and can you trust her at the moment?
Yeah. Look, it's fine. I had a good conversation with her yesterday, and we will continue to work in the best interests of the nation. We speak at National Cabinet, and we'll continue to speak on a whole range of issues.
And what did you make of her still going to Parliament after this COVID test?
Well, that's a matter for her. When I had my COVID test, I had to stay home until I got the all clear.
A couple other quick issues. I know you're short on time, but the vaccine passport that's been spoken about, we know tourism's so big for Queensland. What's your view on this? Because the Qantas chief spoke about whether or not this might be something in place domestically as well as internationally. Is that something you could insist upon for once the vaccine's in place for anyone going to Queensland domestically?
I think we'd have to get AHPPC advice on that. You know, I think we're seeing large rates of COVID across the Northern Hemisphere. The last thing we would want to see is plane loads of people coming here with COVID. So whatever measures are put in place to keep Australians safe needs to be put in place, and that's a matter for the federal government. I do not have any jurisdiction over the international borders, but I will say this: the biggest risk to Australia is a large influx of people coming from international destinations. So I absolutely accept that Australians should be returning home, and we are all doing our part to help that. But the biggest risk to Australia and our economy and to our health is if the international borders were to come down. I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Tom.
Okay. Queensland
Thank you.
Premier
I've got to go.
Annastacia Palaszczuk.
Thank you.